How's everybody doing? Enjoying Moose Fest?
Yes.
Cool. Well, my name's Sean Ender. I'm a filmmaker out of Evergreen, and I'm gonna tell you a little bit about a project I've been working on. Working on for the last like 2 years. It's a documentary called Colorado's Moose. It's an hour-long film. It's still a work in progress. It's pretty close to getting finished, but I'm going to start off just with a trailer that I put together, and this will kind of give you a sense of what the film is about, and then I'll go on from there and tell a little more about it.
It's pretty clear there were moose in Colorado prior to European settlement.
In the early 70s, the possibility of bringing moose in started to be discussed at the top levels of the Division of Wildlife.
Did we have the potential habitat to support animals on this landscape?
They had the public input, they had the concerns from the ranchers. The biologists didn't think there was going to be a problem.
The reintroduction of the moose in Colorado literally started right here. They're still an animal that probably the majority of folks in the United States haven't seen.
Colorado has a population of people that really are into the outdoors and appreciate wildlife, and it attracts people to the state.
There's just something, I can't tell you what it is, there's just something special about them.
They're larger than life, stands 7 foot tall, and is not gonna run away.
The opportunity to go into the wild and see moose has proven to be a significant economic benefit to some of these communities.
This area, Colorado, is so special. Because if you want to come see a moose, you come to Walden, Colorado.
We're proud to be known as the moose feeding capital of Colorado.
Our interest in moose expansion in Colorado is really based on providing wildlife-based recreation.
There's a whole beautiful world out there that so many people don't see. That's part of what I really like doing about art shows, is telling them how I got the shot. They're always fascinated. I feel like I've made somebody's day happy.
They're very popular with wildlife watchers. They're a charismatic species. That's exciting for people to get to see that.
Everything in the wildlife business is a balancing act.
We're responsible for managing the species, but relatively speaking, there's not that many compared to the other species. So we don't have the luxury of having an infinite number of resources to put into the management of the herd.
Our biggest challenge always in wildlife management is striking the right balance.
There's a lot of public support for conservation efforts and seeing that these species continue to thrive. She jumped up and the calf jumped up and followed her, and so we just got kind of a quick glimpse of them crashing off through the willows, and that's oftentimes all you'll get. Maybe down here a hair.
It's imperative that we as a community work together to make sure that we have a healthy, sustainable wildlife resource, but while doing that, it's something that we can manage in conjunction with the private landowners. They depend on the land to make a living as well.
We take care of this ground for our cattle, but in the same hand, we're also taking care of it for the wildlife.
We're going to manage moose for a sustainable population. There will always be moose to see.
The whole North American model of wildlife management is based on hunting as both an opportunity but also a tool.
We're using the hunter money to manage the moose. We're going to allow the hunter to harvest a certain amount of those.
My goal as a hunt master is to find an old cow that's out of her breeding cycle.
See Billy, who's a young guy, have an opportunity like this. I was super excited for him.
That stalk on the moose yesterday was a great experience. To be able to hunt moose in Colorado is awesome.
There's a tremendous amount of pride and just being excited about where we've come with moose, but the future and where we're going to go.
It's a tremendous story for wildlife management.
So that's a little bit about what the film's going to be about. So like I said, my name's Sean Ender. My company is Ender Post Inc. in Evergreen. I've been doing documentary work for about 10 years now. I started my company in 2016, primarily doing documentary films. I kind of started off in the museum world and as a post-production company, but have kind of since expanded into doing everything, a lot more filming. And this is some of the TV stuff that I've done in the last couple of years. So I've done a wide variety of work, but primarily what my focus is nature, wildlife, conservation. That's really what I'm passionate about in my life and in my filmmaking. So that kind of led me to start this project on moose. Like I was getting into filming and went to an area that I knew I'd seen moose in the past. So I just spent a couple days up there filming them, and it was a really cool experience, and I wanted to kind of delve deeper and see if there was a story there. And the story really kind of snowballed the more I worked on it. It really developed, and everybody I talked to was great and led me to more and more of this all-encompassing story. So the film is about its history, it's about the reintroduction, it's about wildlife management, it's about tourism, the economic impacts that the moose have had on certain areas like North Park and Walden. And it's about balancing all of that with land use and land managers. So on the subject of tourism, the next little clip that I wanted to show you, not about tourism. About history. So the beginning of the film is kind of about the history of moose in Colorado. They were a transient animal to the state, but they never really took hold here. But in 1978, 79, there was a lot, and before that, there was a lot of work that was done to research and figure out if this was a viable option. And so this is kind of the end of that sequence, and it's about the reintroduction of moose.
They had the public input, they had the concerns from the ranchers. The biologists didn't think there was going to be a problem. It was a go in a matter of less than 2 years.
At the time, there's pretty strong consensus that, yeah, this was something that should be done. And so in the late 1970s, Colorado Division of Wildlife brought in moose.
First moose were transplanted to Colorado in 1978. Started with a transplant of 12 moose.
The first 12 moose came from Utah. They had moose in the Uinta Mountains causing overpopulation problems. They trapped and tranquilized them and then flew them into the truck sites and were transported by truck to North Park. Marlin Perkins was there with Mutual of Omaha Wild Kingdom. We had built exclosures to put the moose in, and it was a series of trucks that brought the moose in.
This is where it all started. The reintroduction of the moose in Colorado literally started right here.
The 1979 transplant was an additional 12 moose from near Moran Junction, just outside of Grand Teton National Park.
We went up there with horse trailers, Wyoming style. They literally just had an enclosure where the moose would walk in. We'd count if it wasn't the poll cow-calf ratio we were after. We'd chase them out and we'd open it again until we got to the population structure we needed and loaded them in horse trailers, and off we went back to North Park.
Of those 24 original moose, 5 of them were bulls. The majority of them were cows. You want to get as much reproductive potential on the ground as quickly as you can.
And from there on, the moose thrived.
So a lot of people will ask me and want to know what goes into filming and making a project like this. It's a lot. So I started this, like I said, in 2016. I think my first day was sometime in September, and I just finished doing principal photography in July of this year. I went back to my project and saw that I spent about 40 days in the field filming for the project. And part of that is, if you guys are out here trying to see moose, you might not see them, you might see them from a distance, but there's a lot of time spent in the field trying to find them, finding them doing the right things. There was a lot of, it was important for me to capture a variety of behaviors, a variety of moose, from calves that are 10 days old to old, huge, big mature bulls. And then the film is, the story is told through interviews. There's no narration, it's all interview based. Did 13 interviews for the project. Some of them are a half hour in the field, and some of them took like 2 hours to do, because the people who were involved in this story were fascinating to talk to. They're extremely knowledgeable, and they really helped this story kind of come together. One person I interviewed was Steve Porter, who was a wildlife manager when they were reintroduced, and he was gracious enough to let me use, he had over like 300 slides that he let me use. So I spent some time scanning those in and using those, and then I made a decision to actually film those projected, so there's work that went into that too. This is a story about moose, but one thing that was important to me was to capture a lot of Colorado, because it's such a unique place to come and see moose. It's different than places like Minnesota or Maine that are kind of more like what you would think of as traditional moose habitat. So it was important for me to go out and capture a lot of scenics and a lot of different wildlife that they share their habitats with. So there's a lot of that, as well as a lot of moose footage too. So now we're going to look at tourism. They have had a significant impact on areas. A lot of people come to Walden and North Park. There's a lot to do in this area, but a lot of people come to recreate and see moose. So this is just a little section that's about the tourism aspect that moose have had on the state.
From a wildlife management standpoint, it's been a very successful endeavor.
The potential conflicts that we looked at early on in these transplant efforts have not materialized. The opportunity to go into the wild and see moose has proven to be a significant economic benefit to some of these communities.
In North Park, you're either a rancher or you're a lumber guy. But I knew, living in this town, if we didn't have tourism, this little town would probably close up.
I'm telling you, North Park has a ton to offer from a wildlife perspective. I call it kind of a hidden jewel, actually. It's one of the very few places in Colorado, especially in the mountains, that really hasn't changed much in the last, gosh, probably 50 years.
The moose introduction to Walden has really put Walden on the map as far as the town you need to visit. This area, Colorado, is so special, because if you want to come see a moose, you come to Walden, Colorado.
The residents here realize economically these moose are an important asset to this county. There are a lot of people that come to Walden, Colorado, and their sole goal is to see moose. And I mean, we're proud to be known as the moose feeding capital of Colorado. It's pretty cool. They're still an animal that probably the majority of folks in the United States haven't seen. And I'll run into people and I'll start visiting with them, and their entire goal is to see a moose because they've never seen a moose before. When they do see a moose and they've never seen one before, they are genuinely excited.
Coming up here, their first glimpse of a moose is they really don't know what to make of it. They're larger than life, stands 7 foot tall, and is not gonna run away.
And I think that's really what drives people to come here to see a moose, is it's an experience they've never had. I see them all the time, and I still find myself stopping. There's just something, I can't tell you what it is, there's just something special about it.
So I told you I spent about 40 days or so in the field filming. That adds up to a lot of footage. So I went through my project again and calculated that I have just under 66 hours of footage, and that has to get cut down into an hour-long film. So there's a lot of work editing that goes on. But it's actually gone really smoothly. So far, like I said, it's still a work in progress. I currently have an hour-long rough cut done, so there's still work that needs to go into it. But there was time spent in transcribing and writing and cutting the trailer. But really, the meat of it, the getting to where I am now, really only took about 40 days. And I think it's gone so smoothly because of how filming just kind of came together. Each story led me to a different avenue, a different subject. And so I'm planning on making 3 different versions. I'll talk a little more about that later. But for people who've never seen an edit, this is what it looks like right now. So like this all is video tracks, so that's layered, and I can, if you guys want to know more, I can happy to answer questions afterwards. And then all of this is audio. When I'm done, that's like all of these tracks are probably going to look like that. So there's a lot of audio work that goes into making wildlife films. But the next scene I want to show you is that. So a 2-minute section zoomed in kind of looks like this. Moose, like any other species in the state, have to be managed. The issue is there's only about 3,000 moose, and compared to, I don't remember how many deer, there's a ton of deer and about like 260,000 elk. So the challenge is coming up with a cost-effective way of managing the species so they don't become overpopulated, so they don't cause problems, so they don't ruin their environment. So there's work being done. I don't know if Eric Bergman's here, but if he is, he's supposed to talk about telemetry. But anyway, he's a biologist at Fort Collins, and one of his projects is, like I said, finding a cost-effective way to manage moose. And so part of that is they're trying to draw this correlation between available forage, what they're eating, primarily willows in this area, to births, how many calves are out on the landscape, what the reproduction rate is, and that'll kind of give them a sense of the health of the population, and they can manage the population from there. So what Eric does in the winter is, you saw some of that helicopter footage. They fly around in the winter, and they study moose, and they'll capture some of them, put radio collars on. They get a lot of information from doing that, but one thing they do when they capture a cow is they'll pull blood, and from that they can tell if that cow is pregnant. And so then in the summer, early summer through the fall, they send a field crew out to kind of follow up and see if that cow was able to give birth to a calf, and if she was able to bring that calf through to the fall. So that kind of gives you reproductive rates and survivability. So this is just a scene of these guys in their field research doing observations. It's called calf radio research.
If we do adjust our gain and we are picking them up at 3 or maybe 4 or 5, from there we hook on directionals and our portable receivers, and then we go after them from there.
Maybe down here a hair.
Even though we do have GPS collars on these animals, it's not as easy as it sounds. It's not usually just see them off the road. I'd say the majority of the pursuits are through pretty thick stuff, through willows, crossing rivers. These are big, majestic creatures. We tear through this stuff, making all kinds of noise, and you can kick out of something that size and barely even hear them sometimes. They're graceful for how big they are. If they don't want to be around, they're not going to be.
We were just now along the Laramie River tracking a cow with a GPS point from this morning. This is an animal that we had seen last week with a calf, so it's important for us kind of through the season, opportunistically, to go after her again and try to get eyes on her again and see if she still has a calf. That just lets us crudely estimate survival across the season. Her signal is getting louder and louder, so we must be getting closer, so that's when you slow it up and try to move more silently and keep your eyes peeled. And we're able to skirt around the side to get a better look at her. She jumped up and the calf jumped up and followed her, and so we just got kind of a quick glimpse of them crashing off through the willows, and that's oftentimes all you'll get. Colorado has a giant population of people that really are into the outdoors and appreciate wildlife, and there's a large number of sportsmen out here as well, and it attracts people to the state. There's a lot of public support for conservation efforts and seeing that these species continue to thrive, and so I think that that's one of the real drivers, and people enjoy coming to Colorado to see a moose.
Like I said, I'm at a rough cut. There's still some work to be done. My goal is to get the film finished sometime this winter or early spring. There's then figuring out the distribution of the film, and that's where I'm trying to create 3 different versions for it. One distribution channel is through film festivals, so I'm planning on targeting nature, wildlife, conservation type film festivals to get it out on that circuit and draw some attention to it. And then the Outdoor Sportsman Group, so Outdoor Channel and Sportsman Channel, as well as Rocky Mountain PBS. I've talked to programming executives there that they're very interested in airing the film. So the next step in that avenue is securing sponsorship for it. Can you change it? So I have this flyer up. I can send them out if people are interested in learning more. And I got some in the back too, but in order to get it out onto TV, out to audiences, there's commercial time that's involved in that, but that's kind of what some of my focus is, and I can talk to people more about that if they're interested. But that's kind of where I'm at with it right now. I'd love if you guys, if you're interested to follow the film, you can. I have my website is enderpost.com, and I have a page up there, and I have a Facebook page dedicated to this film, and recently was told that I should get an Instagram, so I have that now. But I'll take pictures of places I'm filming. I'm going up to Montana to film in a month or so. I got a lot of wildlife photography on there, and plenty more to come, because like I said, it's my passion. I go out and do this in my spare time too. And I have postcards in the back. If people want to get in touch with me, business cards and the flyers are back there. But take a postcard, follow the film, reach out if you want to make a comment. I love interacting with folks. So and if people have some questions, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, thank you guys.